Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association, or JOMA podcast. I'm your host, Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and proud JOMA member. And today I'm really honored and really excited to be interviewing Eric Kussin. Before I introduce him, I'm going to say, please, if you have comments on this podcast, please reach out to us at health, health.org. Also, if there is somebody you want to hear, you yourself want to be interviewed, there's a topic you want to hear being covered, please reach out to us. And I'm going to say that today's topic, I think it's again related to mental health. I cover it a lot because it's so incredibly important. But Eric has a revolutionary approach. It's really revolutionary. I think it's really important. And I'm really honored to be interviewing him. Got him from a colleague of mine who went to college with him, and that was a really fortuitous, in my mind, connection, and I'm really excited. So I'm also going to give a trigger warning. There is some talk about some very triggering topics, including suicidal ideation, so please, listener discretion is advised. Eric Kussin is a magna cum laude graduate of Cornell University and a 20-year professional sports executive who got his start at the NBA league office. After 5 years with the league, he went the team business route and rose the ranks with the expansion Chicago Sky and then the Phoenix Suns. He later switched over to the NHL, working with the New Jersey Devils and Florida Panthers as their chief revenue officer. However, a debilitating mental health crisis stopped his career and life in its tracks for over 2.5 years. After many failed treatment modalities, he was lucky enough to learn healing practices that enabled him to dig out of his abyss and found a higher calling, launching an organization at the end of 2017 called #SameHere, the Global Mental Health Movement. #SameHere's alliance is comprised of athletes and celebrities, along with media members, expert practitioners, advocates, and everyday heroes who've come together, rallied around the vulnerability Eric first shared to make talking about mental health a common topic for 5 out of 5 of us. You'll see in the talk, he talks about how they say mental illness affects 1 out of 5, and he's like 5 out of 5 of us have mental health that varies on a regular basis. Their #SameHere movement has swept across college campuses in the U.S. from Cornell to USC, K-12's corporate offices from CNBC to United Rentals, professional sports teams from the Golden State Warriors to the New York Mets, and military and first responder groups from the NYPD to the DoD in just over 3 years of programming. And that's with COVID getting in the way, okay? The movement has recently begun to expand globally as well, with events in markets outside of the US. Eric hosts a podcast called We're All a Little Crazy with NHL great Theo Fleury, and has launched an app called the SameHere Scale to normalize emotional health monitoring and daily check-ins. To keep his foot in sports, Eric consults for a number of professional sports teams and leagues, guiding their ticket and sponsorship sales and retention efforts. Eric can be reached at eric@samehereglobal.org if you need to email him directly. And the website is samehereglobal.org. They're also on Instagram at @samehere_global and Twitter at the same handle, I believe, and also on YouTube and Facebook. And I'm super honored and super excited to be interviewing Eric today on this super important topic. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And as we spoke briefly before, trying to dispel stigma, trying to talk about mental health, and not even mental illness, but mental health is so incredibly important. And I would like if you could start by telling us how you got into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you bring up the concept of mental health versus mental illness and the term stigma. I want to go back to both of those because I think part and parcel, the differentiation between the two, the way that we use the two, and then the concept of stigma and whether or not continuously perpetuating our desire to get rid of it is actually helping us or hurting us. And these are things I didn't come to realize until getting into this space, which, to your question, was not something that was on my radar screen. So I worked in professional sports my whole career. The mental health was not something I thought applied to me. It's not that I was one of those people who damned other people who claimed they had mental health complications, and I'm using the term claim in air quotes. I was not something where I was afraid to talk about it. It was just, oh, okay, well, that's the health of some other people. That's not me. I need to focus on things like running stadium stairs and getting my heart in good shape, and other health conditions, the physical health that my family members had, and I need to look out for. So I started at the NBA league office. I worked for a number of NBA teams, Chicago Bulls, Phoenix Suns. Then I came back East Coast and worked for the New Jersey Devils in the NHL. And I was then chief revenue officer with the Florida Panthers, 34 years old, top of the world, single guy living in South Beach, making more money I'd ever made before in my life, no state income tax. What could be bad, right? And, we talk in this space a lot about the masks that we wear. I wasn't wearing a mask. I didn't think that I felt bad at all. If you had given me truth serum, the smiles you saw on my face back from them, this is now December of 2014, to give some historical perspective of when it happened. Seeing the pictures, seeing the interactions I was having, this was where I wanted to be. And what started to develop about January of 2015, I started to lose interest in things outside of work, and I didn't know why. I four in particular I kind of point to, and everyone's got their different things that they enjoy doing outside of their daily work routine. So for me, first, hanging out with my friends and being social and going out for dinner or for drinks afterwards. I don't have a desire or interest. I'm telling my friends, you guys go out, I'll meet you another night. I just got to catch up on sleep, and eventually I'll feel better and want to go out and meet you. But right now I'm just going to shut it down after work. Second thing, going to the gym and working out. I'm a competitive guy. I love getting in the gym and throwing weights around. Ever since I played sports, I don't have the energy for it. So I'm coming home and I'm leaning my leg against the arm of the couch and falling over on the couch and passing out and waking up at 2 a.m. and then going to the bed and sleeping the rest of the night away. On top of that, watching my teams on TV, no interest in that, not even turning the TV on, not checking the scores, not looking at the box scores and online or on Twitter or in any of the other social media channels. And then playing in my own leagues was the other thing, like being competitive, even though it's not high level competition anymore. The weekend warrior playing on weekends. It just, my friends are playing in leagues and I'm not even joining them. And, I think so many people can probably relate to that as they hear that, whatever your job is, right? You love being an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. You go to the well every single day on something that gives you that dopamine hit. And so for me, it was being Eric, the sports executive. That's what I loved. And my job is what's clicking for me. I'm still loving going into the office. So this must be the world's way of telling me, this is the way I justified it, that my job is that important to me and that I'm one step away from my dream job of being a team president. So if I'm chief revenue officer right now, I just got to grin and bear it and put my nose to the ground. And this is the way the world's telling me to tunnel vision and focus even more on it. And that was obviously an excuse, looking back on it, but I didn't know it was an excuse at the time. And so I'm getting in at 6:30 in the morning instead of 7. I'm leaving at 11:30 at night instead of 10. And I'm staying there longer, putting more hours in, because it's the only thing that is clicking for me, the only thing that's registering, until I wake up one morning and it was like I was pushing myself out of quicksand to get out of bed. Like I was walking with cinder blocks on my feet to get over to my closet, open my closet door. It looks like a bomb has gone off. Like I had nothing organized in there, even though everything was in its proper place. I couldn't make out, should I wear a t-shirt? Should I wear a button down? Should I wear slacks? Should I wear jeans? What belt color goes with what shoes? None of that was registering for me. And I did what I think a lot of people do when our brain starts to go in a tangent in a direction we don't like it. I tested myself, right? It's probably the worst thing you can do, but you don't know it because you want to fix things when things don't feel right. And so I picked up this picture that I had of my two nieces. I have four now, but at the time I had two, and Rebecca and Kaylee. Okay, they're two most important little people in the world to me. And I test myself to remember their middle names, and I can't remember their middle names. So you can imagine how that freaks you out, something that's so top of mind, and you're testing yourself to see if there's this recall because being able to put an outfit together is difficult for you. So you're going, okay, let me do something simple, and it doesn't register. So, they call it white knuckle it, like you clench your fists and you're just like, I'm just going to get into the office. I didn't shower that day for sure. I get in, I sit at the desk. Some of the folks who are 30 years of age and older who listen to this podcast will understand this reference. When I do it in schools, they don't know what I'm talking about. But I sat at my computer, and we see emails as straight lines always on our computer, Outlook or Gmail or Lotus Notes or whatever it is. And the emails look like light brights to me. That's why I said, you got to be 30 or older to know that reference. Things are just sparkling. I can't make out words on
Light
the
brights.
computer. Yeah, right. I mean,
Those
that's
are
what.
good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like I think it's making a comeback, but it's
My
not as
grandkids have
popular.
them. I have them. Yeah.
Okay, so that's going on. I'm looking at my staff, who's usually, I think of them in segments: group sales, season ticket sales, single game sales, service, partnership sales. And it looks like Grand Central Station. It feels like everyone's moving 100 miles a minute, almost like you see in a movie when they, speed up the film. And I knew I had to get through that day because that night I had to give a presentation. We would do in sports, we would do these presentations, whether it's in basketball, you do it at halftime, in hockey, you do it between the first and second period or the second, third period, where you have prospects come into a suite. You entertain them by bringing the food, the drinks, and then you sell them on why they should be members of the team, season ticket holders or corporate partners, and why they should vest. And looking back at it now, it's some 8 years later, I'm able to recall what I would have said back then had my mind been straight. Like, I remember who all the draft picks were: Jonathan Huberdeau and Alexander Barkov. I remember our goalie was a Hall of Famer in Roberto Luongo. I remember our owners investing in the team and bringing, solid base into the community, and all these, buzzwords and touch points that would normally come straight to mind. That's your role as a chief revenue officer, is to psych people up that your reps are bringing in to make it easier on them to have transactions happen. And I get up there, and I don't think I've ever quit anything before in my life. I still don't think I quit anything looking back on this, but certainly something health related. Is I get up there, there's 50 people staring at me between the first and second period, and I read off an index card because I was so scared that I couldn't remember anything at the time. Hi, my name is Eric Kussin. I'm the chief revenue officer with the Florida Panthers. And my brain just goes dark black. And I go, this is Matt, our team president. He's going to take it from here, like almost instinctively. And I just walk out of the suite. So imagine someone who's used to presenting. I've had to present in front of NBA players my whole life and NBA executives. And here I am, and nothing is coming to mind. So I go back to my office, game ends, and our owner, Vinny Viola, who's still the owner of the team, he's a West Point grad, so military guy, comes in. It's like, Eric, I could tell something's up. I'm not trying to call you out. I want to be supportive. How can I help you? What do I need to do for you? I want you to know you could take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, come back, hit the ground running. And when I heard 3 months, who's not going to get better in 3 months? That was what went through my mind. As messed up as my brain feels, 3 months is an eternity. And then, you run a health podcast, right? So think about this for a second. Anyone who's thinking about the comparison between physical and mental health. When we're younger and we get sick with strep throat, bronchitis, and pneumonia, the three most common things we get sick with, okay, flu, but trying to use the one where we have infections, we take this thing called an antibiotic and we feel better, right? Whether some people don't love it because it messes up the gut biome. If you need something that's a quick fix, it works for you, right? And your parents say, curl up in a blanket, eat chicken noodle soup, drink tea and watch your favorite movie, and you're going to get better. So when your brain's not working, okay, you think about the worst case scenarios. Do I have a brain tumor? Did I have a traumatic brain injury from the time I was a child that's now just manifesting from all these sports that I played? Or is it this thing called mental health, which in 2015 knew nothing about? So you're thinking about, well, okay, if it's this thing called mental health, medications have helped me before. And what's the only education I have on mental health? What I've seen on TV with commercials. And the commercials show for 15 seconds a gray cloud over a sad face with brain coming down and you wearing a heavy coat that you can't move around in. And then all of a sudden, 15 seconds in, the clouds go away, the sky is blue, the birds are chirping, the music's nice, the coat's gone, there's nothing weighing you down, and you're unencumbered and you go back to your life.
Magic pill. Magic pill.
Magic pill. Yeah. And I just think it would be that easy, right? Because you read, I listen to like the little, oh, well, you could have these side effects, blah, 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 right at the end. So I've heard those and I'm thinking, okay, but 3 months, I can try 3 different courses of drugs. That's a lot of time to get better, as messed up as my brain feels. I'll find the right combination in 3 different attempts at this. So I go home to New York, leave all my stuff down in Florida, thinking I'll come back for it. I was agoraphobic. I mean, you talk about it, felt like going outside felt like my kryptonite. I don't remember how I got even on that plane. And I just kept to myself, go lay down in my bed, meet with the first psychopharmacologist I meet with on my first appointment. And I'm prescribed 5 different medications, being told that I have a depression on top of anxiety and I need heavy artillery for it to be knocked out of me. So, when people well, how did you get 5? Well, okay, you get the SSRI that they tell you that you need. They get the booster to the SSRI, like an Abilify or Rexulti. They have an off-label drug that they say works as an additional booster, right? Like an Amenda, which is a Alzheimer's drug. There's the benzodiazepine, right? And then there's one other, I forget exactly what they added to it, but yeah, like they're giving you the explanation for why each of these 5 in combination with one another are needed.
Wait, they started 5 medications at the same time?
Same time.
And this was not a psychiatrist, though. You said a psychopharmacologist?
Psychopharmacologist. So I had, this is look, the reason when we get to my organization, why I started an organization is if someone's dealing with a mental health challenge, where do you start? Mm-hmm. Okay. So does someone go to their general practitioner? Does someone go to a psychologist? Does someone go to a psychiatrist? Does someone think I need to go to the hospital because my suicidal thoughts as part of my mental health challenges are so extreme that I need to be watched for the next 24 hours and I need to be regulated? I'm using all the terms in the industry based on what medications I need to take. Do I go to residential treatment center? There is no game plan for where the right starting point is, right? So when I'm as, let's call it messed up as I feel coming home from Florida, where I've had weeks now, multiple, where I can't move and I feel paralyzed in my brain and my brain has gone dark and I can't put sentences together. I can't look people in the eyes. Some more detail what it's like living at that time period. My parents tested me. Order something off the menu, call it in. I couldn't remember what I wanted or what my parents wanted to be able to have the conversation with the person on the phone. That's how turned off my brain felt. And, for people who haven't experienced that before, I don't look at it as an us and them. We're going to get into that language. I just look at it as I was at a further end on the spectrum than other people may have gotten to. Everyone's had anxious feelings and thoughts where the brain doesn't click the way that it has before. And in the moment, you can't capture what you want to share and your brain feels like it's paralyzed. Imagine having that continuously at a very extreme level, right? So it's just different levels of it. So
I just want to say something for just 1 minute, though. I just want to say something for 1 minute, though, is that one of the problems with your mental health, which is really mental illness, like you said, it's on a spectrum, is that you can't see it.
You can't see it. And people look at me and they go 6'4", athletic looking enough guy who worked out enough beforehand that I hadn't, in my sedentary ways from how I've been feeling, gotten too badly out of shape, probably stayed in decent shape because the anxiousness was at such a level that my sympathetic nervous system was turned on so high that even with either the slowdown of my metabolism because I wasn't eating as frequently as I did before, or the sedentary way I was living, it wasn't affecting my weight. It was probably affecting it in a way where people are looking at it saying, you look even healthier because you usually carry around an extra 10 pounds. And now you're back to like your playing weight size,
Right,
right?
right. You could have lost weight out of illness and
Yeah,
you look amazing.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, so back to your question though, of why psychopharmacologists, look, you go to your general practitioner and they go, yeah, you're really in it right now. Like my recommendation is I've got a specialist who specializes in finding the right mix of medications to really pop you out of this. Since you asked the question, I'll go into detail on it. I mean, different thing. This is something I could talk about for 24 hours straight. So I don't want to bore people with too much of the details. But since you asked about it, I got into his office, major hospital. I'll spare the name of the hospital as I do in a lot of these times of retelling the stories. But I get into his office in the hospital, and I'm given a sheet of paper, packet of paper to fill out with a pencil, 0 to 10. How much do I agree with these statements? Things like, I don't want to be here anymore. Life isn't worth living, right? And I fill that out. It takes me 10, 15 minutes to fill it out. And when I come into his office, he spends the first 10 minutes just with a pencil adding up the numbers. Like, and this might be an indictment on the medical community, but it's like, you couldn't just like feed it through a Scantron or have someone else on your staff add it up. Like,
We don't have people to do this. I do it myself.
Right. So he's adding.
I mean, I don't do it in front of the patient though.
You don't do it in front of the patient, right?
No.
So he's doing it in front of me. Okay. And you need heavy artillery to knock it out of your system. So that's where I started on the 5 drugs. Now, my next 2.5 years of my life, from 2015, early on in the year, January, through the middle, August of 2017, I laid in a bed, stared at the ceiling, did not watch TV, did not listen to podcasts. I would text my friends back just saying alive, waiting for 52 different combinations of psychotropic drugs to kick in and work for me.
And this is all with just one professional, this psychopharmacologist?
No. So it was about 4 different psychopharmacologists. They were all the same type of doctor, but after 3 months of it not working, I've got this great one for you, right? A family friend or someone else in the medical community that we were connected with. You got to try my doctor friend so and so. So I went everywhere from Long Island to Manhattan to Connecticut. Like, drove 2 hours to go meet someone who I was told is the guru. The commonality in all of them was there was a whiteboard, and here's the SSRIs you've tried, the SNRIs, the MAOIs, and the tricyclics.
Yeah.
And they were Xing out what I tried on each of them, like I was a dartboard.
Guinea pig, yeah.
Yep, and a guinea pig. But at the time, I'm not using that terminology. Why? Because I don't know that there's anything else to heal me and to use to work on. So I'm thinking, as the athletic sports guy, when my coach told me in the past, run stadium stairs, do bench press, do squats, do plyometric box jumping, that's all different versions of the same thing, working out. So what's the different versions of getting my brain back together? Trying different medications, right? We're sold on this idea that there's a chemical imbalance,
right,
and that's what's wrong with you. So if you shoot me up with whatever drugs you need to shoot me up with. So I was the perfect candidate to be a customer, essentially, and to try to find the right medication. So, okay, that doesn't work. I'm then told to do TMS therapy by the 4th specialist I was with.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again. All this time you weren't doing any kind of therapy, just the medication?
I was doing talk therapy.
Talk therapy, okay.
So I was doing talk therapy. So now, what's interesting about the concept of talk therapy, which we could certainly get into, whether I believe that's helpful or not, even when like I went in for talk therapy, there were times where my sympathetic response was at such a heightened place. The doctor looked at me and said, Eric, you can't even engage in talk therapy right now. Like, so when you think about, we already have a dearth of practitioners out there, then add on to it the ones who are only trained in this concept of talk therapy and don't have other tools in their toolbox. How are they helping you to get better if you feel like you're even more messed up when you look at them across the room and they're sitting in one chair and you're incapable of us having a session right now?
Right. I want to underscore what you just said a second ago, that is really, really important, especially since COVID is just getting a person to be with you in the mental
Yes.
health space is a huge ordeal. There are wait lists. It's just there's
There's wait
inadequate.
lists. I mean, the last
Unbelievable.
practitioner I sent someone to is charging $750 every 45 minutes because the demand is there, so they can charge whatever they want. It's now
Right. And that's another thing, just to underscore for just a second, though, that if you don't have money,
yeah,
it's unreal. There's no mental health parity. That's a
right.
huge thing. What are you going to do if you don't have the money to pay for it? Every other medical condition you have insurance. Not for this.
Yep, it's awful. We'll get into
Yeah.
hopefully
Sorry.
ways that we think we're solving that, but
Yeah.
so I'm told to do TMS therapy, where TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. They put a helmet on your head and they shoot electromagnetic waves into your brain. They have this thing called the motor threshold where your thumb jumps and they feel like they know that they're hitting the right spot in your brain. And if you want a simplified understanding of it for people who are listening, it's essentially trying to get the neurons firing again. So it's like a hard restart to your computer. And I do 23 sessions of that, 23 days in a row. You want to talk about insurance not covering it, at least at the time. And so $350 a session, no insurance. Good luck to my savings at that point, right? So I'm doing that, but because I'm told this is going to fix me, right? And we're always looking for what's the thing that gets done to us. And I can't take credit for this, but someone who works on our alliance, he says it's like in mental health, where Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz, we're trying to find the wizard. We have the ruby red slippers on the whole time. We just don't know that that's our path back to Kansas, right? So I'm looking for the Wizard of Oz because I don't know any better. And so 23 sessions in 23 days in a row. It's 4:00 in the morning on the morning of the 24th. And I'm showing you my hands. I'm sitting on my hands like this because this thought starts playing in my mind. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a voice that I was hearing. It was a thought. Swallow that bottle of pills, swallow that bottle of pills, swallow that bottle of pills. I couldn't get that thought out of my head. And for anyone who's hearing that, you either recognize it or I'll tell you what it is. That's a suicidal ideation. And people think, we just lost DJ Twitch as an example. Well, they had a smile on their face. They were dancing. So often, unfortunately, suicide gets placed in this category of choice. Why did that person choose that? Hopefully my story helps illuminate, and this is what I do when I go into schools, that I wasn't choosing anything. That thought was choosing me. I didn't know where it was coming from. I ended up learning as we go through the rest of the story where it came from, but it came over me. And now an object like a bottle of pills that I used to see as something you take once a day that helps you is now seeming like a weapon to me. And in my mind is saying, swallow it, swallow it, swallow it. I have another part of my brain, fortunately, my prefrontal cortex, that's fighting this error message that's playing over and over again in my mind. And my prefrontal cortex is going, what are you doing? You don't want that. Why is that happening? And that's the reason why I was able to sit on my hands, was able to ask my family, like, you got to get me help. You got to take me somewhere. I go inpatient, again, without mentioning the name of a hospital, to one of the top treatment facility centers in the Northeast. And I meet with the attending psychiatrist, and she has her top doctor plaques on the wall. She's Harvard med school grad. And she looks at my chart. She says 2 words that changed my life at the time, not much for the better, but in the long run for the better. She says, Eric, you've tried everything there is. Your last resort, so uses those 2 words, is to do ECT, electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy. So when you hear last resort, you've tried these 52 different drugs, you've done the TMS therapy, you see that there's this progression and this game plan of, let's try on all these things, then the sci-fi stuff, then the extreme sci-fi stuff, and that's the only thing, we're sorry. And you could confirm or deny this. I go in after watching the videos on ECT, which we commoners know as shock therapy, and I get into the room for the first time. I'm wheelchaired in. I get laid down on a hospital bed. They put a blood pressure monitor on my ankle. They get my arm ready to put propofol in so I can be put under general anesthesia, an oxygen mask on my face so that I can breathe. And then they put the electrodes on my brain that once I go under for the general anesthesia, they're going to shock my brain into seizure to hope again for a hard restart. And so I ask not the attending psychiatrist that I was speaking to with the top doctor Plex Wall, but the one who was administering the ECT. I remember it's just so interesting thinking how messed up my brain was that I didn't know to ask this question beforehand. So like with the oxygen mask on, I turned to the guy who's about to administer and I go, how does this work exactly? So it's like just interesting to think that like I've gotten to this point of having been asked. And he's like, Eric, we don't really know. Right. So like, oh, great. So he tells me this story about how it was a procedure that was meant for epileptic patients and that the goal was, I believe it was in the 70s that they tried it. We're going to induce seizure under general anesthesia and reverse the seizures that they're having when they're awake. And that didn't work for the epileptic patients. But what did happen was there was a large enough sample size that enough people reported a lift in mood, is what they described it, that now they use it as a last resort treatment for mental health. And I guess my brain was working enough at the time to be thinking like, so there's really no formal study, like a lift in mood is someone just saying like, on the happiness scale, I went from a 4 to a 6. Like
No, I don't know of it, but I'm sure there's research on it. Not that I know of as a pediatrician,
yes,
but I'm sure
and I'm being facetious, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that it's considered a last resort, I don't think that's a term anyone in medicine should be using or hearing, right?
For sure.
So especially as we roll out the rest of the story, and I tell you what I learned about healing. So I do the 12 sessions over 5 weeks, and I leave the hospital feeling no better than I had the 2.5 years prior, essentially thinking my life is over because I've been told I'm treatment resistant. I've tried all the meds, tried the TMS, tried the shock therapy. None of it's working. With this being an Orthodox podcast, you guys will like this piece of it. I go home in bed. 3 days later, my parents, they're former educators, mother's a language teacher, father's a principal. Well, they go to these continuing education courses all the time at their temple. So they go to this one course being taught by one of the congregants at the temple. And the name of the course is Integrative Breathing Practices. Had never heard the term integrative before and didn't know, had never done a breathing practice before, surely. So I don't think much of it. My mom runs back from the class at night, 9 o'clock. Right on the dot. Eric, we met this Dr. Donna. She's in our temple. She treats differently than all these other doctors. She's a psychologist, but it's not talk therapy. We can't really explain what it is. Please go see her. Please go see her. So 3 days later from that, I'm sitting on her couch. And for everyone who's been to a mental health appointment, you can recognize this, is I was expecting, even though my parents said it's different, the cadence and the chronology of the questions to be the same they'd always been. And there was always 3 segments to every appointment I'd been to. Hi, Eric, nice to meet you. What are your symptoms? And you list your symptoms. Okay, based on your symptoms, Eric, here's your diagnosis with segment 2. And the diagnoses I got when you were telling me some of the past episodes you've had, I was diagnosed with everything from melancholic depression to anhedonic depression to PTSD, OCD, CPTSD, ADD, ADHD, agoraphobia, right? All these different labels. And then that was segment 2. And then, okay, based on your label, the reason I was tried on the 52 different drugs is because what drug fixes that label, right? So that was the formula that I was used to. I didn't know what she was going to do. So I go in there expecting similar with a slight tweak. And the appointment couldn't have been any different. She said, Eric, the couch is your stage. I'm your audience, single person audience. I don't want to ask you a lot of questions and pepper you with questions. So I'm going to ask you one. What is the story of Eric's life? Catch me up.
Wait, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Weren't you going through what you call talk therapy?
I was going through talk therapy, but let's talk about what talk therapy is, right? Talk therapy oftentimes is, let's start from the beginning. Tell me about childhood and tell me about something difficult you went through. What's the relationship with your mother, right?
Okay. That's important.
Right. So think about the questions that get asked, right? What's bothering you? Okay. Even if you want to start in a broad way, tell me she didn't do the what's bothering you. She didn't do the tell me about the relationship with. She didn't do the where did this all begin? What symptoms started when? None of that. So what I was used to in traditional talk therapy, That's gone. I appreciate you asking that question.
Wow.
I think what disarmed me, and this is a psychoanalytical tool in and of itself, is she said, I want to hear the story of your life, right?
She gave you
And
full reins. She gave you full reins. You tell your story. I'm not
you
going to
tell your
direct
story,
you.
and your story may come
Wow.
about you're a star athlete, or you were, a scholar athlete award winner, or you played basketball in college, all the way to, not my case, but you lost an uncle at a young age and it
Right.
tore you apart, right? It could be anywhere in between. But the fascinating thing about that is whether it's traditional talk therapy or the way we talk to each other as friends, we never do that. It's, hey, doc, what time's my appointment? Hey, do you want to get lunch? Hey, have you finished your homework? It's always in the moment segments of
Right.
what's happening. We don't do big picture takes and then see what story we're telling about ourselves in the aggregate, right? So what comes out of me now, which will take me 3 minutes to tell you, but at the time took me 50 minutes. I'll remember a couple of memories at 5 years old, going to Disney World, right? You're going over those and you're trying to, especially at a time when I was struggling for memories. And then I said, well, then I'm 8 years old. And then this is what pours out of me. 8 years old, I'm the middle of three boys. We're a sports crazed family. And my older brother is 4 years older than me. He breaks his femur bone in an accident and put into a body cast for a year and homeschooled. Heals from that and gets diagnosed with ALL, children's form of leukemia. So late 80s, early 90s, not the best prognosis for, even though doing much better with the drugs now. Back then, that was very tenuous. We didn't know what the outcome would be. 5 years of the chemo and radiation, goes into remission. So we're all celebrating. A month later, he's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends, open top, no seatbelt in the back, doing what kids do, trying to distract the cars behind them, driving only with their permit, flies out of the back on the Meadowbrook Parkway, lands on his head, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eyes. Heals from that, goes to college, feeling a pain in his knee, blood tests come back, same cancer from childhood returned. And now that the same cancer returned, they have to give him a stronger dose of the same chemo meds they were giving him before, which is doing a great job early on in knocking out the cancer cells. But what we know about chemo is it's not so well targeted, especially back then. It's attacking a lot of the healthy cells. And you're seeing his body break down. He's hunched over and his joints hurt and he can't move as well. Going to law school at this time while this is happening, I'm up at Cornell, up in college, and I get a call from my parents, come back and meet us at LIJ. Okay, if you want to use some old school Jewish language or remember Long Island. And I drive the 4 hours back, meet them there. We meet with the neurologist, sits us down. Todd's gone into septic shock, 105 fever. He's gone into a coma from that, and we don't know if he's going to wake, and if he's going to wake, if he has any brain activity. So you guys can make a decision as a family. Do you want the tubes breathing for him, and for how long? We just can't guarantee any outcomes. And so we do that for 3 months. Parents living at Ronald McDonald House by the hospital. I'm coming back and forth from college. Miraculously wakes, full cognitive faculties about him. Asks who won the World Series before he went under. But his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock. So he needs to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father donates a kidney to him. That all ends. And I get that job at the league office. 3 of my close friends, 22 and 23 years old, unrelated to one another, as you hear the outcome, pass away of either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed heart condition. So one guy running on a treadmill collapses, one guy walking with heavy boxes up a flight of stairs. So I give that, when I tell the story, I give that level of detail because I think in the mental health sphere, if we don't share what happened to you, we are losing the narrative. When we share PTSD, depression, anxiety, we're leading with the label, and then people don't like to relate to labels. And so they go, that's not me. Okay. We'll talk more about that. So I share the reasons because I said it took me 50 minutes. The last 10 minutes, my doctor said she wouldn't ask me other questions. She stopped me and said, I'm sorry, I promised you I wouldn't. But what else happened to you as a child and young adult that impacted your mental health that I need to know about? Now, this is 2017. I know nothing about mental health other than I said, Donna, I've been laying in bed for the last 2.5 years with all these different labels for chemical imbalances, taking all these meds. What does what I just told you about my life, you just asked me to tell you about my life between the ages of 8 and 23, have anything to do with why I'm laying here at 35 unable to get out of bed and work. Like, I don't understand the connection. And so she gives me this analogy, which I think is phenomenal in terms of the visual. And I use it when I share it, is if I had a front row seat when I was an NBA executive, wearing a suit, entertaining clients, and these 7-foot athletes are running up and down the court and sweating when they run up and down, and the sweat's flying off and hitting my suit, or the ball goes out of bounds and they land on me trying to get the loose ball. My suit gets sweaty. I go home that night after 3 hours, put my suit away for the dry cleaner, take a shower, put a new suit on the next day, nice and clean, like the sweat didn't happen from the night before. She said, you had a front row seat, but it was for the game of life instead of an NBA basketball game. And the game of life was represented by a muddy wrestling ring in front of you, and then another muddy wrestling ring right next to that one. One your brother was in, one your friends were in. And every move they made to stay alive, the mud from splattering was hitting you in the front row and hitting you in the front row. You actually had negative coping mechanisms because you were so adept at things like playing your own sports, getting involved in sports business and being able to focus on that, that the equivalent of that was like looking at the Jumbotron in the arena, looking at the LED lights, watching the fans, hearing the music. You never paid attention to that mud that was splattering on you. You knew that your brother was in the wrestling match, but you didn't notice the mud that was hitting you. And the biggest difference between this game of life and the NBA game is you didn't just stay there for 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, 35 years. You've been sitting in the same seat as this mud has been caking up on you. And it got so heavy to the point where you didn't even need to try to stand up one more time. Your body just fell to the floor from how heavy it was. She said, that, Eric, is stress and trauma. That's the brain-body connection. That's what builds up in your system over time. And I got angry at that point because I said, if that's what mental health is, just having a front row seat to watch things happen to other people in our lives, take me out of the equation at 35, take the average 15-year-old. Watching things happen to other people in their lives. Okay, watching your parents get into fights and get a divorce. Watching your parents lose their job and lose the house. Watching your two best friends' friendship dissolve and then never talk to each other again and feeling the awkwardness of the two of them in the room. Watching your best friend deal with being bullied in front of you or being bullied online or being verbally abused by an adult or a friend coming up to you and telling you, confiding in you, they're being sexually abused, or your friend dealing with the sickness of a loved one or a loss of a loved one, or your parent dealing with caring for a sick parent who's unfortunately terminally ill. It's like, I don't know a 15-year-old, let alone a 35-year-old, 55-year-old, 85-year-old who doesn't deal with one, some, or many of those things. If that's what mental health is, there's not a person on this planet whose mental health has been impacted. And you, as a society, like, and this industry perpetuates that this is a topic for people with mental illness. And I was like, that's not what I'm taking from what you're telling me, because if that was the case, I'd have been running, brain exercises instead of stadium stairs this whole time, and no one told me to do that, right? And as you could tell, I get passionate about it. So landing the plane on the story, she sends me to a weekend breathing course. I'm the only man, only one under 40, only one born in this country. So it's me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. Okay. I'm a fish out of water, like sitting there with like cut sleeve basketball t-shirt and shorts, and like they're all in their traditional garb and stuff like that. But I love these women because they're teaching me about the vagus nerve. They're teaching me about the amygdala. They're teaching me about how slowing down and doing this rhythmic breathing pattern starts to normalize the central nervous system. 30 days in, I'll use Hanukkah as a reference. It's like the first night of Hanukkah. I wake up and I look at my controller and I'm like, I want to turn the TV on. This is the greatest feeling in the world. And then the other thought that came over me was, I want scrambled eggs for breakfast, right? So 2 things that I had not thought about, a desire, came back to me, and it felt like that Hanukkah morning, like you're getting this gift. And so I went to the largest, now we'll get into the nitty gritty of, the messaging. I went to the largest nonprofits in our country, in our world, for mental health. NAMI and Mental Health American, Bring Change to Mind, Active Minds, JED Foundation. My thought at the time was, I have sports contacts, people who have large platforms. I will give my sports contacts to any one of these organizations who are talking about it in this way that I just came to understand it. I'll go back into working in pro sports and I'll leave this space. I did my debt to society of being in hell for 2.5 years, and I'll go back and I'll do the sports thing I built up for. And I go to all these websites and I see 3 things. This is in 2017 that are all the same. And you think consistency is good when you're trying to get a message out there. They're the same messages that they are now in 2023, some 5.5 years later. And they're 3 messages that actually move us back instead of bringing us forward. Okay. What are those 3 messages? First, 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. Same stat that has been perpetuated for over a decade now, though I was seeing it in 2017, so only 5 years ago. What does that stat 1 in 5 do? They think it normalizes it. Oh, 20% of people is a lot of people. No, that makes it the us and them.
Right.
When I get into a room, I've done enough of these presentations. When I ask people, if you're not in the 1 in 5 category, what are you? Here's the 4 terms: healthy, fine, normal, okay. So we've got a society that believes you're either mentally ill with this disorder, one of these labels, or you don't fit in that category. What that does during Mental Health Awareness Month is it makes us say, let those people talk. We'll be nice to them during that month. Okay, so that's
We'll be aware. We'll be sorry.
We'll be sorry. Exactly.
Yeah.
So then you use the term stigma early, right? And stigma exists. So you can't deny that stigma exists. However, stigma should not be in our campaigns. What do I mean by that? Well, it started with NAMI had Stop the Stigma, and then everyone else rallied around that. Stop the stigma, break the stigma, erase the stigma. Baseball has strike out. Hockey has slap. Football has kick the stigma. The term stigma means that human beings are forming unfair opinions and judgments about other human beings. Have we not lived in a political environment long enough to know that when you tell people to say stop something and they're in another group from you, even if you're saying it to the ether and you're just throwing it out there, the stigma is formed by human beings. Someone is receiving that message. And when they say stop, stop, break, and slap, it means I'm going to slap you, or I want you to stop because you're the one who's doing it to me, the poor group of people that are the advocates, because we're the ones going through it. That doesn't make this binary topic be one that comes together.
Right.
It rips us further apart. Okay. Then the third and final one that I noticed was the way celebrities' stories were shared. You're not alone. Britney Spears goes through it too. She has depression. She's part of the 1 in 5. Lindsay Lohan has it too. She's part of the 1 in 5. She's got anxiety. And then they would link to an Us Weekly or People Magazine article. Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. So now add these 3 things up. It's for 1 in 5 people. We need to stop stigmatizing that poor group. Let them talk in May is Mental Health Awareness Month and not judge them. And if you want to know if you're in the group, do you run off the basketball court in panic attacks like Kevin Love? Do you shave your head like Britney Spears? And do you say crazy things about your family, be anti-Semitic, and think you could run for president like Kanye West? How many people are going, raise my hand, I want to be part of that group, right? It doesn't exist. And the more celebrity stories that are shared, our whole industry is patting themselves on the back. Oh, another person came out with their anxiety story. Another person came out with their depression story. That doesn't normalize. That solidifies the same erroneous messages that already exist. So the only thing that normalizes this space, and the reason why the name of the organization is same here, an American Sign Language sign, I'm pointing my thumb at my chest and I'm pointing my pinky out at you, is doctor, you and I were the same. And I don't know much of your personal story, but I know that as a human being, you've been through challenging life events, and those challenging life events have impacted your mental health. That's the common thread. That's 8 billion people. That's a tribe that everyone is already a member of. They just don't know it yet. And that's the message we need to keep putting through: the divorces, the breakups, the job losses. So the organization that we formed was getting people on the celebrity and, let's just call it, influential platform side of things to share what they'd been through, not their label. And then on the other side, to get integrative practitioners, inventors of havening and tapping and EMDR and brain spotting and ART therapy and all these things that are modalities, back to your question about talk therapy, that people could have been giving me when I was going into these appointments had they been trained in them, that are mind-body exercises that could have gotten me to a better place where, okay, if I don't have the ability to talk, what can I do right now that starts to lower my sympathetic response? that starts to release and rewire out some of the trauma that exists in my body, the way that we see animals be able to tremor trauma out of their system. And so that became the formation for the organization, working with schools and offices and colleges and sports teams and service departments, and creating this movement around storytelling and normalization of practices, where we call the practices STAR, stress and trauma, active releasing and rewiring, or a gym for the brain. And let's get people into the funnel through the storytelling, seeing that we collect people. This is, you're a part of our tribe, you're a part of our group. We make it inclusive as opposed to exclusive. Sorry, you haven't been diagnosed with these 5 symptoms of this list or 20 or more. You don't have depression, so you're not part of this group. The exclusivity of that needs to go away, because the DSM-5 is a subjective tool that's used to make order out of chaos. So sorry, I go on a rant when,
but
I get...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not just that, but I love this approach. Is what you're doing is you're doing a mental health approach as opposed to a mental illness approach. Like the idea that you have to wait till you fall off a cliff to get help, as opposed to how do we treat our mental health like we treat our physical health. You go to a doctor on a regular basis for your physical health. Nobody does that for their mental health.
So what you're saying is our chief medical officer, Dr. Andrew Pleener, says what you just said, says it in a slightly different way, but in lockstep with what you said. So take something like heart disease. We don't sit on a couch, eat nachos all day, eat French fries, wait for this pain in our jaw and down the right side, and then all of a sudden go, well, I should go to the cardiologist now. But that's what we're doing with mental health. So like, think for anyone who's thinking about like, why should I go before I feel these things? Because why are you waiting for a heart attack of the nervous system to happen for you to go and get help? You should be doing stuff that's proactive. And by the way, proactive does not mean you need to spend an hour and a half a day doing these exercises. You build in 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and you learn how to power wash the brain and shut things down so that the nervous system can regulate and reset. That's what's needed, right? And what doesn't happen is, you'll appreciate this because you've seen the visual before. Growing up in New York, you know, before you're the age of being able to drive in on your own, you take the train in and out of the city when you're a teenager. So I remember like my friend turning to me at 16, 17 years old, and we're watching either 9 in the morning when we go in early, or 5:30, 6 at night when we're coming back. And we're seeing train fill with men and women are holding a canister of alcohol with a brown paper bag around it, and their head is like this, and then they're falling asleep and drooling on themselves, basically waiting for the day to be over so they can just get back to their couch and lay there, watch TV, go to sleep, rinse, wash, repeat, and wake up the next day. That is mental health. That looks like being tired. That is an overwhelm of the system from too much stuff over time, and not being able to handle all that, and not having the tools and not being equipped. And then what does that lead to in terms of brain body? That leads to a cancer at 50 years old. That leads to a heart disease at 50, 60 years old. That leads to all these things. And it breaks your heart to see how that stuff develops, because there's ways to proactively work on this that fortifies mental health and ultimately, as a result, physical health at the same time.
Right. You're talking about getting healthy mental health habits like we get healthy physical habits. We talk about them all the time. We don't talk about how to have healthy mental habits. There's no prevention.
None.
Which is crazy. Which is crazy. That's crazy. Be using the word
there's also
crazy.
there's no language, right? One of the things that we created is this thing called a scale, right? So the scale is a continuum, but it's an easier term to use. And so the scale goes thriving, gliding, surviving, fluctuating, struggling, sinking. If I asked you, Doc, how are you doing? You'd go, good. And then we'd go on to the next conversation. Or you go, I'm all right. You go on to the next conversation. When we take physical health, when a child in school goes to the nurse, they put a thermometer in their mouth, and there's common language: 98.6, 101, low-grade fever, 103, high-grade fever. When you step on the scale, like you were talking, when we do the proactive physical health, 1 year you're 180 pounds, the next year you're 200. Doc asks you, why do you think the weight gain happened? What's going on? Let's take a look at your, saturated fat intake, right? With mental health, we don't have common language. We have, you're either GAD-7, PHQ-9, you're depressed or anxious.
Right.
Or
we're looking for pathology. We're looking for pathology.
And so the scale is an attempt. We have it in schools, we have it in offices
Right.
to say, let's look at our nervous system states over time and let's see where we're at. When that sympathetic response jumps up, we move to the right on the scale. I was living as a child in what we call either fluctuating or struggling, where my mind was constantly going, that ambulance that just rode by my friend's house, that's going to be at my house when I get home. That call I just got on the cell phone where I see caller ID came from my parents, it's because they have to deliver bad news to me. That's living in that perpetual state of threat around you, which eventually leads to the shutdown, which happened with me. But we're not training people to understand that and to be able to recognize that.
Right. Not just that, but these are things that happen to your siblings. So I don't think people would have perceived it as happening to you. And we all have things that happen to people around us. And the idea of that being stress for us, I don't think people think about that. Like as a pediatrician, I don't, think about that. How does the sibling? I mean, we kind of do, like we might offer support vaguely, but I don't think we understand. I mean, here's an extreme example, but still.
Well, so use that as an example, right? So this being an Orthodox podcast, I can bring up a Hebrew school situation, right? So I remember, so what you're putting into the something happening with a sibling is a thought that's happening to you as the other sibling watching that happen, right? So your brother's sick, or in the case of anyone else out there, a sibling is dealing with something. Your mind goes to these places at a young age. What happens if my brother dies?
Right.
Where does he go? Will I ever see him again? Right. So that sympathetic response is growing in my mind at a time when we don't talk about that stuff. Like my dad was the ultimate optimist, right? That's the way that he dealt. Pod's going to be fine. The medication is going to be great. It's going to take a number of years. But so when your dad's speaking to you that way, that's not a invitation for let's discuss how this is impacting you. What questions do you have? How can I help you work through this? It's hold on because things are going to be great, right? Like, and you have your own fears, so you hold on to them. So the Hebrew school example is at that time, I'm 8 years old. I remember I'm in the library. We had this tiny little library at the Hebrew school. Took out a book on Adam and Eve. Okay. And I'm listening. Oh, this is how the world started with Adam and Eve. And then my mind goes to, well, what happened before that? And what happened before that? And what happened before that? And I can't get that thought, right? For a very active mind at the time, I can't get that thought. What happens at the end? Where do we go in? And now I'm starting to feel claustrophobic. And I'm like, and that's all related to the thought of my brother might pass. So I'm trying to think, will I ever see him again? But what does again mean? These are the things that like live inside of us that start to impact our mental health. But because you weren't in a car accident where someone next to you flew through the windshield, your mental health is fine, right? And that's where I think it's so fascinating that the brain takes in all around it and thinks about all the threats. And then in thinking about the threats, then thinks deeper. And that's what starts to build that stress and trauma in the system over time. And that's something we really got to look out for, because the kid who's sitting in the back of the room who's doodling, but they're being quiet, we're like, oh, that's the good kid. That's the well-behaved kid. They're fine. Are they really well-behaved and good? Or are they just trying to avoid what the thoughts are that are going on in their mind that they want to dampen it and make it go away?
Right. You can't see it. You can't see it. And again, we're not being proactive here.
Yep.
There are, just so you know, organizations within the Orthodox Jewish community like High Lifeline that actually support the siblings as well.
Yep.
But really important to think about supporting them, not just, with fun activities and stuff like that, but with their mental health as they go through this, which I think they do, by the way. But not everybody gets that, right?
Right.
And it's so important. The other thing I was thinking of is you were talking about working. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you were doing when you were working harder and harder. I'm thinking workaholism, just to summarize it, and as a compensatory.
No, you nailed what workaholism is, right? And I just got back from, I'm wearing the shirt like St. Xavier University, right? Like the most non-Jewish school in the world, right? Like the college, in the NAIA, and I'm working with their athletes. And I said to them, you as athletes have workaholism the way that I as an executive had workaholism. So I said it earlier, but You could be an accountant, you could be a lawyer, you could be a store shop owner, you could be someone who's an athlete out of college, or you could be me, who is a sports executive. If you love what you do every day and it gives you that dopamine hit, you're very lucky, but at the same time, you're also at risk. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if what mental health is this invisible backpack of stuff that we hold behind us, right? And that we're carrying along with us. And then we keep going to the well on the thing that allows us to escape the pain and the heaviness of that bag. On the one hand, it's great that we've got something that we're passionate about and we love, but it's having us neglect the other stuff. It's the equivalent of not paying attention to that mud that was caking up on me. So I did an event with the Miami Dolphins where it was a recovery event, and I maybe I offended people. I don't know. I think not, because I had people, the guy who's running the event gets up there and goes, "Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm an alcoholic," and everyone's like, "Hey, Chris," and I get up there and I go, "I'm Eric, and I'm a holic." Like I didn't plan that. Like I just, and people are like, "What?" And so I give like a little Cliff Notes version of the story I just shared with you, and I was like, I was a workaholic. And you might think that that's not as maladaptive as the drinking that you all are sober from right now. But guess what? Like, where it brought me in terms of how I use it to cope with dampening the emotional pain that I was carrying was probably as bad as any coping mechanism that's out there, because I allowed this stuff to build and build and build. And
it worked until it didn't.
Yes, exactly.
Like any drug.
Yep. Work is a drug. Sex is a drug. Gambling is a drug. Shopping is a drug. Food is a drug, right? Like, when you do those things in moderation, they're all great. But like, we go to the well on them, and society allows some of those things to be more okay than others.
Glorifies it sometimes.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. The glorification, I mean, that working with the athletes, well, Eric, you're the first one in the office and the last one to leave. You're the model. We want everyone to work as hard as you. Where the athlete that comes in and goes, "You watch so much game film and you're in the gym longer than anyone else." I'm not, okay, work as hard as you want, but how are you, to your point about scheduling and routine, where are you finding the routine and the scheduling to put those slots in between that hard work so the brain's able to calm down and refresh and restart? We don't think about that. We're an axe that's chopping down trees, and we're not sharpening the axe. And we're like, wait a second, but the axe is still working with the level of sharpness that it has, so I don't have to sharpen it anymore. And eventually the axe stops chopping trees down because it just gets so dull.
Right, but I think society looks at us and says, "Oh, you're producing. Do more."
Right.
You know what I'm thinking of? And this is a sports. Maybe you can. It's not your sport, but I like gymnastics, and I'm thinking of Simone Biles. I heard somebody talking about that recently and saying like, "Oh, these snowflakes, right? That can't function in the real world, and so they just drop out of a competition. Like, look at that." I don't know if you want to comment to that.
Let's use a Simone Biles example. This is why calling it depression and anxiety works against us.
Right.
So if you read the comments when Simone Biles pulled out, it was, well, if she had depression, why didn't she inform someone before she came to the Olympics and give the spot to someone else? As if that's how mental health works, that you either have it or you don't. And then because you have it, now you have this thing that either tells you can play or you can't play. Not how mental health works. What wasn't talked about with Simone Biles was raped by Larry Nassar, and the only one on the team who had been through that. Everyone else was young enough now on the team that they hadn't been through that era of USA Gymnastics. Secondly, brother was on trial for triple murder. So two of the heaviest things you could be dealing with, she's dealing with going into it. Now you go into the Olympics, the load that she's taken on her system of, wow, the arena's empty, but it's usually full because it's COVID right now. Why? This feels weird and different. And like eyeballs feel even more on me because I'm alone in this arena on top of all these things that have been going on. And when you saw her, she still tried to push through it. She's doing flips. And what do we know about mental health? Well, when mental health symptoms start to arise, the brain-body connection starts to go awry. our ability to have fine motor skills goes away. I know that when I'm typing on a computer, this is a lot less athletic than Simone. My right hand lags compared to my left hand. That's part of my nervous system feeling dysregulated. And where I want to bring that point home is everyone watched that DeMar Hamlin situation with the Buffalo Bills. And we did a podcast about it the other day, and we were talking about if the NFL had made the wrong decision and made those players play shortly afterwards, what would have happened?
They wanted to.
Well, the NFL did. I don't know that the players did. The NFL did.
No, that's what I mean. The NFL wanted to. What does that tell you about society?
Yes. Okay. So the NFL wanted to. They could cover up all they want, but it came over the announcers that they're getting 5 minutes to warm back up. But what I was going to bring up there was, if those men had been asked to play shortly after, you would have seen the sloppiest, ugliest football ever. And some people not even be able to get on the field, because when the nervous system is overwhelmed like that from the traumatic event that they just saw, and you saw it in the deer in the headlight looks in the eyes, you saw it in the sobbing, in the leaning into one another, they experienced something they never, and this air of invincibility of, I can get injured in a major way, but I can't die on the field. That veil got taken away. So for everyone who's damning Simone Biles, if you had watched those players after living through traumatic event try to get on that field, it would have been awful. And guess what? They had to take them off the field because, one, it wasn't the right thing, but two, that's not the safe thing to do.
Right.
So for all the macho, and I'm a guy who played football, for all the macho guys out there who say snowflake and she was, being treated differently than everyone else. No, she wasn't. The NFL had to stop playing the same way. She had to come off of being a gymnast.
Right. She literally did not know where her body was in space. They call it the twisties. She did not know, and it was not safe. And it's just unbelievable that we treat people like pawns in the corporate, commercial world.
You nailed it. Well, got a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. We don't have a lot of time. I know you have something else, and I'm sorry for being late. And this is a long podcast. I want you to just talk a little bit about your organization before we stop, please. But your story is unbelievable, and you're such a hero. And thank you for what you're doing. You are bringing so much important stuff out there in this space. It is beyond. I'm just like, I'm blown away.
Thank you. So we're an organization that started as a nonprofit, did not take funding because we didn't want to go the way of a Headspace or a Calm, where it's an easier lift early on when you take funding, but then you become part of the corporate medical industry, where Headspace started with a great message of, we're going to teach the world meditation. And then it became, get 10% happier in 10 days guaranteed, right? It's the antithesis of our message of what's the quick fix and how do we get you better? So what I'm going to share sounds like a lot, and it's wearing a lot of different hats, but it's to try to plant a lot of seeds in a lot of different areas so that we can, as they grow, build this forest of mental health.
Right, because we have to change the world. There's no other way. We have to change this.
You have to reverse engineer this.
Yeah.
So we have a K through 12 program we call Same Here Schools. We've got a college program, of course, Same Here Sit Downs. A office program, corporate or blue collar offices, we call it Same Here Safe. We've got a service department program for first responders, military, we call Same Here Service. And then sports teams and leagues, like I was mentioning with the Miami Dolphins, we call it Same Here Sports. In each one of those, we start with 4 pillars. Foundation of culture change is number 1. Changing the lens through which we see this topic away from 1 and 5 towards 4 and 5, more towards the experiences of what we have as opposed to labels, and looking at mental health across a continuum instead of it being binary. That's step 1. Step or pillar 2 is establishing common language. So, okay, we now have established that we all have a story and we all go through challenging life events. How do we help explain and communicate with one another where that impacts us and how that impacts us? That's where we introduce the scale. It's done through posters, through desk charts, and through an app that we have called Same Here Scale. Okay, we've got an individual version, we've got a office version, we've got a teacher version. That enables an openness and communication of, where am I at on the scale? Not happy versus sad, but thriving, gliding, surviving, right? and then what's the reason behind it. So we start to tag up events that are going on in our lives that are contributing to where we're at in that scale, so that we're able to see trends over time. And so it tracks it in a chart. That then leads to pillar 3, which is what's the science behind why we're moving up and down. It's not because it's this gray cloud above our head. It's just because the vagal tone changes, tightens up. It's because the amygdala starts to become overfunctioned, because cortisol starts running throughout our body, because our cells become inflamed, because the wavelengths of cells, 5 different wavelengths, stop communicating with one another. Because when we go out of alpha, and all of a sudden we're in beta and we're freaking out because the nervous system is in that dysregulated mode, the different parts of the brain can't talk with one another. So that's pillar 3. And then pillar 4 is this concept of STAR exercises. So stress and trauma, active releasing and rewiring. And we help organizations build a gym for the brain, whether that's a physical gym for the brain where they learn the different exercises, or it's a virtual one. So we do them online where you go in and it's like a 3D room. From those 4 pillars, we have directors of the different programs that live in a school district, in an office. When I say live, 3 hours a week, right? 15 hours a month, whatever the amount of time is, and then start to deliver content and programming around those 4 pillars. So I'll use a very case in point example. I would never teach suicide prevention as a first step going into a school or an office, because it would be treated like Just Say No for Drugs was when we went to school. Suicide's not going to impact me. I'm a happy person. Well, if I lay these 4 pillars down and I show you how stress and trauma impact all of us, back to my suicidal thought, I told you I'd close the loop on that thought. Where did that thought of swallowing that bottle of pills come from? Because my nervous system was so dysregulated that now all of a sudden I'm having these irrational error messages that I can't stop. And guess what's making those messages even stronger? Me freaking out that I'm having those messages.
Right. It's too far down the road. It's not preventative, really.
It's not preventative.
Wow.
But if we give a heads up to people what self-harm messages feel and sound like, not giving very specifics, but it makes you feel like you want to harm yourself. That's a maladaptive coping mechanism. Guess what? That's something that you can overcome, that when you find help in the moment, it feels like you're in a dark tunnel, but there's people on the outside who can see wider, can help you get to that place where you start seeing wider again. Now your mind goes to a different place. Yes, I feel this right now, but oh, I was told that if I get help, I can get out of this place, right? So we have something called Lifesaver. So LIFE is almost like the stop, drop, and roll of suicide prevention that we're teaching in schools.
Oh my gosh.
So
this must really help prevent drug. I would guess that this would also even be really truly preventative against drug addiction. Instead of Just Say No or DARE or all those other programs.
Chairman of our board is a guy named Dr. John Rosa. Italians and Jewish people are cut from the same cloth, right? Italian guy who's constantly talking with fans. He's surrogate to the White House the last 3 administrations on the opioid epidemic. That's why we're attached at the hip every day. I mean, he and I are on calls all the time, because drug addiction, overdose, these numbers, 30,000 more last year than the year before, highest on record. This is mental health.
Right.
Trauma, addiction, suicide, overdose, opioid, all these terms that we hear that get treated in each story like it's a different train wreck.
Right.
They're all cousins living in the same house. And until we as a society connect the dots that these things are all together, the concept doesn't change. It becomes, who are the addicts? Who are the people in recovery? Who are the people who have mental illness, right? And that's what the powers that be in the pharmaceutical industry and elsewhere want. What's the quick fix for the one thing that you have that's different from everyone else?
And this stuff takes more time, honestly. It takes more time.
It absolutely, it's an edge. And so
prevention is not like a huge moneymaker.
It's not a huge moneymaker. And so that's why we're planting all these seeds, 5 areas of programming, the apps, the star rooms that we're creating. And then I'll kind of close it on.
We're going so late.
We've got a group called Regional Psychiatry that is using the concept of health coaching up to the psychiatrist, back to what we were talking about, that there's no starting point.
Right.
We want to be the concierge for people, where people come and go, let me learn, let me be educated on what's going on when I feel like this, so I can take some choices and options Do I want to do the EMDR? Do I want to do the havening? Do I want to do the tapping? What might work for me and my situation? I want a lot of different tools. Doctor, you can take me through these different ones and show me what might work for me, as opposed to you try the med and you wait for the Wizard of Oz to fix you. I want to be a more active participant in my healing process.
Right. Did you talk at all about educating mental health professionals?
So we have a Same Here Psych Alliance, and then we have a Same Here Doctors Alliance, which is functional medicine and holistic practitioners, and all holding hands. We actually have, last thing I promise I'll share. We have a course that'll be coming out at the end of January, 17 hours of Dr. Vincent Folletti, who was the chair of the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience Study, Dr. Stephen Porges, who invented polyvagal theory of how the nervous system shifts, and then 15 different practitioners of these different non-medication healing modalities to talk about the science of how the nervous system starts to get affected and why these modalities help and are different tools in your toolbox to be able. And that's something that a parent can take a course on. That's something a mental health professional can take a course on. And there's an accreditation on it. Whether it's counted for CMEs, right, is always a
Right. Is there a fee for this course?
There will be a fee, only because we had to compensate the doctors in terms of putting it all together. So recouping that, but everything that we make goes back into the nonprofit that then now fuels things like being able to do more programs in schools, more programs in offices. So it's not like we have a brother, sister, for-profit, nonprofit. The for-profit piece that has the app, that has the courses in it, that whatever revenue that's taken from that gets fed back into the nonprofit. We could go into underserved communities. We could supplement schools that only have a certain amount of funding. And, it's a way to keep the engine going, because to your point, education and laying foundation takes such a long time.
Right. And this really needs to be available to everybody. It can't just be available to people with more money.
Well, look, when I say it costs something, it's peanuts compared to what it costs. Yeah.
Right. I'm just looking at your overall programming. You did not just create something to bring in a bunch of money for your organization. You created a nonprofit because we want our whole world to be healthier. We all are in this together.
If I was able to subsist on $0, I would do this every day for $0. My board hates me sometimes because I agree to go out and do the present. You got people making $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 on presentations, and I go out like, you don't have anything, or you've got $100 to be able to donate to the nonprofit. Sure, I'll do it. So it's a balance, but I'm mission driven more than anything. That's where I want to see change happen.
You are absolutely amazing. And we could talk all day. And I can't believe we got to 10 after 10, even though I said for sure we're going to be done before that. This is amazing. How can we find you?
So a number of different places. The website is Same Here Global, SAMEHERE, as in you and I are the same. So samehereglobal.org, ORG. And then most of our activity happens on our social channels, where we've developed a significant community. It's really awesome to see people sharing. So Instagram, if you use Instagram, it's at Same Here. Then there's an underscore before global. So at Same Here _ global. Twitter, same thing, at Same Here _ global. We share everything there. Thousands of people coming together, in the tens of thousands, I should say, sharing stories and being open and being supportive of one another to make people not feel isolated and feel like they're in it together. It's a beautiful place to come and see hand holding happen.
That is amazing. Do you have a YouTube channel?
So everything is Same Here Global, right? And
YouTube,
so,
Facebook, presumably.
Yep. I'm not as active on YouTube as I should be. I'm more active on Instagram.
Okay.
And I do
a lot of people don't have Instagram, but they do the other thing. That's why. But
Facebook, if they want to find us on Facebook, we have Same Here Global. So 70,000 folks there that are all together.
Wow.
So yeah, it's nice.
Oh my gosh. I could talk to you all day, but I know you had an appointment at 10 minutes after. So I have to thank you so much for doing this with me. May you go from strength to strength. You're amazing. What you've started is amazing. All the people you're doing it, you're just changing the world. I am so honored to have been able to do this with you today.
Likewise. No, I appreciate it. I'm sorry I spoke so much. I'm passionate about it. So next time we'll have more back and forth.
There you go. We got to do part 2. That's what it is. I'm not done yet. I just got started.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Likewise. Talk to you in a bit.
You will.
Thanks for listening to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at joma_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.